Have you ever held a piece of history in your hand and wondered how many stories it could tell? What if that small piece of metal could whisper the tales of America's resilience, innovation, and change? Today, we dive deep into the world of the 1939 Jefferson nickel, a coin that not only carries the face of a founding father, but also the soul of a nation standing on the brink of transformation. From the final years of the Great Depression to the dawn of World War II, this coin witnessed it all. And if you think every nickel looks the same, think again, because the 1939 Jefferson nickel holds secrets, varieties, and errors that have turned ordinary pocket change into legendary treasures in the world of numismatics. This is not just another nickel. It is a coin with a story that shaped American coinage forever. So get ready to travel back in time as we explore every detail, from design to minting, from controversy to value, and from history to the collector's dream. Welcome to the untold story of the 1939 Jefferson nickel. The story of the 1939 Jefferson nickel begins in an America still finding its footing. After the economic collapse of the 1930s, when the Jefferson nickel series was introduced in 1938, it replaced one of the most iconic designs in U.S. coin history, the Buffalo nickel designed by James Earl Fraser. By that time, the mint had decided it was time for a change, a modern look, a tribute to one of America's most intellectual founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the third president of the United States, and a man whose vision shaped the young republic. The new design would represent progress, enlightenment, and American ideals. The Treasury held a design competition in 1938, inviting sculptors across the nation to create a coin that captured the dignity and spirit of Jefferson himself. The winning design came from Felix Schlag, a German-born sculptor who had immigrated to America and brought with him an artistic style rooted in realism and neoclassical tradition. Schlag's design featured a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Jefferson's beloved home Monticello on the reverse. Monticello, located in Virginia, symbolized Jefferson's intellect, his architectural genius, and his lifelong devotion to reason and learning. Schlag's design was simple yet powerful. It reflected a man of depth and substance, but the road from design approval to production was not smooth. The U.S. Mint made several modifications to Schlag's original work, most notably altering the lettering and perspective of Monticello to fit mint engraving standards and aesthetic preferences. Now we arrive at the year 1939, just 1 year after the series debuted. The Jefferson nickel was still new, but already undergoing subtle evolution. 1939 became a critical year in the series because it marked the refinement of the design, particularly in the Monticello reverse. The first year of 1938 had used Schlag's initial reverse design, which displayed softer details and shallower steps, but by 1939, the mint sought to improve die quality and detail. This led to what collectors today call the reverse of 1938 and the reverse of 1940 varieties. The distinction lies primarily in the detail of Monticello's steps and the sharpness of the lettering on the reverse of 1938. The steps are less distinct, the lines are softer, while on the reverse of 1940, the design is crisper, the lettering is more defined, and the steps beneath Monticello show stronger separation. Collectors often describe these varieties as Type 1 and Type 2 for 1939. The Philadelphia Mint produced both reverse types, creating a fascinating situation where the same year features two distinct designs. This has made the 1939 Jefferson nickel a cornerstone of Jefferson nickel variety collecting. It is a coin that bridges the early design phase and the mature look that would carry through decades of minting in 1939. 3 U.S. mints struck the Jefferson nickel: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each with unique mintages and characteristics. The Philadelphia Mint, without a mint mark, produced the largest quantity, over 120 million pieces, while the Denver Mint struck about 3.5 million and San Francisco around 6.4 million. The Denver issue in particular became notable for its low mintage compared to the others, which later increased its collector demand. The Philadelphia coins were used heavily in circulation, but hidden. Among them were gems that survived in uncirculated condition, showing the beauty of Schlag's artistry, with sharp strikes and satin luster. The San Francisco coins, while more abundant than Denver's, had their own charm, often displaying softer strikes but rich toning over the years. Among the most intriguing aspects of the 1939 Jefferson nickel are its rare errors and varieties. One of the most famous is the 1939 doubled Monticello variety. This error occurred at the Philadelphia Mint, when a working die received a doubled impression of the reverse design, resulting in a visible doubling of the words Monticello and 5 cents. This was not a subtle doubling. It is bold and distinct, easily visible to the naked eye, and one of the most sought-after errors in all of Jefferson nickel. Collecting in high grades, this variety can command thousands of dollars depending on condition and die state. It is a perfect example of how a small minting mishap turned an everyday coin into a prized rarity. Another notable factor is the difference in strike sharpness across mints. While the Philadelphia coins show the best detail in the early strikes, many Denver and San Francisco coins from 1939 are known for weakly struck steps on Monticello that makes finding a full steps 1939D Jefferson nickel a challenging and rewarding hunt for collectors. The full steps designation refers to the number of visible horizontal lines on the steps of Monticello on the reverse. A fully struck coin showing 5 or 6 complete steps is considered a sign of superior quality and is prized by numismatists for its precision and rarity. The year 1939 was significant not only in numismatics but in world history. The global stage was shifting dramatically with the outbreak of World War II in Europe. While the United States had not yet entered the war, the effects were beginning to ripple through industry and society. The U.S. Mint, like many other institutions, was preparing for resource conservation and potential changes in metal composition. These would eventually come to fruition in 1942 when wartime silver nickels were introduced. But in 1939, the nickel still retained its traditional composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This alloy gave the coin durability and a distinctive silvery sheen at home. America was recovering from the Great Depression. The economy was stabilizing and consumer confidence was slowly returning. Coin production was increasing. As commerce revived and people once again carried money in their pockets to spend and save, each 1939 Jefferson nickel that changed hands was a silent witness to a recovering America, a nation standing between economic recovery and global conflict. Imagine holding in your hand a small coin that carries the story of post-war America, a piece of metal that witnessed a nation rebuilding itself, redefining its economy, and restoring its hope after the darkest years of global conflict. The 1946 Jefferson nickel is not just a 5-cent piece. It is a living symbol of resilience, change, and the rebirth of the American spirit. Today, we journey deep into the world of this remarkable coin, uncovering every secret it holds, from its metal composition and minting process to the social, political, and economic backdrop that shaped its creation. Welcome to a story that begins with war and ends with the promise of peace. A story that lies within the glint of a simple nickel, the Jefferson nickel of 1946. After the end of World War II in 1945, the United States Mint faced a unique challenge. For years, from 1942 to 1945, the Jefferson nickel had been struck using a wartime alloy composed of silver, manganese, and copper. This was a temporary measure introduced by the government to conserve nickel metal for military use, as nickel was a crucial component in the production of armor plating and weapons. But as the war ended, the mint sought to return the 5-cent coin to its original composition, one that reflected stability and normalcy. Thus, in 1946, the Jefferson nickel resumed its traditional copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper and 25% nickel, a composition that had been standard since 1938. When the series first began, the Jefferson nickel was originally designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, who won a national design competition in 1938. His design featured a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, based on the president's bust by Jean-Antoine Houdin, and an image of Jefferson's home, Monticello, on the reverse. The coin was meant to honor the third president of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a man who embodied the American ideals of democracy, science, and exploration. By 1946, Schlag's design had already become a familiar face in pockets across America. But this year's issue carried a new meaning. It was the first post-war nickel, a symbol of the nation's return to peace and production, minted in 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The 1946 Jefferson nickel saw millions of examples struck for circulation. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest share, followed by Denver and then San Francisco. Collectors often pay attention to the small mint marks placed on the reverse of the coin to the right of Monticello. For the 1946 issue, the D mark indicated Denver, the S represented San Francisco, and coins from Philadelphia carried no mint mark at all. What makes this year particularly interesting to collectors is the transition in quality and metal composition from the wartime issues. Gone were the large mint marks above Monticello that appeared on the silver alloy nickels. Instead, the smaller and subtler marks returned to their pre-war placement, signaling the end of an extraordinary era in American coinage. The total mintage for the 1946 Jefferson nickel reached over 200 million coins, an enormous number that reflected both the booming post-war economy and the high demand for coinage as American industries revived and citizens returned to everyday spending. Yet, despite its high mintage, the 1946 nickel holds a unique charm. It marks the revival of a peacetime economy, the reemergence of nickel metal in coinage, and the transition to the modern minting standards that would carry through the next several decades. From a metallurgical perspective, the restoration of nickel in the alloy gave the coin its distinctive silvery appearance and harder surface, making it more durable for circulation. Wartime nickels, which contained silver, tended to tarnish more quickly and were softer, wearing down faster in commerce. The 1946 version reintroduced the brighter luster and durability that collectors appreciate. When examined under magnification, early die strikes of the 1946 nickel exhibit sharp details in Jefferson's hair, the cheekbone, and the windows of Monticello, hallmarks of strong minting practices, restored after years of war-driven metal rationing. But the 1946 Jefferson nickel is more than just metal. It's a snapshot of an era. America in 1946 was a country in transition. Soldiers were returning home through the GI Bill, factories were shifting from tanks to toasters, and the spirit of innovation was once again thriving. The mint itself was modernizing its machinery and refining its minting techniques. In many ways, the Jefferson nickel was a symbol of this industrial rebirth. It carried the face of a founding father who championed liberty and progress, and it circulated through the hands of people rebuilding their lives after a global upheaval. For collectors today, the 1946 Jefferson nickel holds several layers of value: historical, artistic, and numismatic. In average circulated condition, it remains a common and affordable coin. But high-grade examples with full steps on Monticello, the term used to describe sharply struck details on the coin's reverse steps, are highly sought after. These full steps nickels are a mark of exceptional mint quality, showing that the dies were new and the strike was precise. Finding a 1946 nickel with full, distinct steps is a challenge because the mint's die maintenance practices in that era often led to soft strikes, particularly on the Monticello steps. Professional grading services, such as PCGS and NGC, recognize full steps designations as FS, and coins with this feature can command significant premiums, sometimes exceeding hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition and rarity of the strike. Among the 1946 issues, the Philadelphia and Denver mint coins are more commonly found in higher grades, while San Francisco issues tend to show weaker strikes and softer details, making high-quality examples from that mint especially prized. Collectors often enjoy examining the subtle variations within the 1946 series. While there are no major die varieties or errors widely known, minor die cracks, doubled dies, and repunched mint marks occasionally appear, adding intrigue to the hunt. The thrill of discovering one of these anomalies continues to inspire coin enthusiasts to search through old rolls of nickels and estate collections, hoping to uncover a hidden gem from this historic year. The story of the 1946 Jefferson nickel also connects deeply to the broader history of American coinage design. It continued a legacy of honoring the nation's founders that began with coins like the Lincoln cent in 1909 and would later inspire others, such as the Roosevelt dime and Washington quarter. The Jefferson nickel held its place in American pockets for decades, with Schlag's design enduring until 2003, when it was finally redesigned to commemorate the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition. But in 1946, none of that was yet written. The nickel was simply a familiar, comforting symbol of America's endurance and optimism. In the context of global numismatics, the Jefferson nickel of 1946 stands as a benchmark of mid-20th century minting. Its composition, design, and historical timing make it a perfect study piece for historians and collectors alike. It marks a moment where art met industry, where symbolism met utility, and where a humble 5-cent coin captured the essence of a nation moving forward from hardship into prosperity. Even today, holding a 1946 Jefferson nickel can feel like holding a time capsule. Each worn edge, each faint mark tells of countless hands it has passed through. Factory workers, soldiers returning home, families buying their first post-war appliances, children saving their allowance. The sound of a 1946 nickel hitting the counter is more than a chime of commerce. It's the echo of an America that had learned resilience through war and was ready to rebuild. As this 2-hour journey through history unfolds, we will explore the mint's transformation in 1946, the economics of post-war metal recovery, the artistry of Felix Schlag's enduring design, and the collector insights that make the Jefferson nickel one of the most studied and beloved series in American numismatics. By the end, you'll understand why this small 5-cent piece remains a cornerstone of U.S. coin collecting, a bridge between the sacrifices of the past and the hope of a new beginning.
Imagine holding a coin that survived the final echo of World War I, a coin struck in a year when America was rebuilding, redefining itself, and stepping into a new era, and yet this tiny piece of metal still carries the scars of its time, the 1919. Buffalo nickel is not just a coin, it is a silent witness to one of the most turbulent chapters of American history. And today, we uncover the mysteries, the design flaws, the minting challenges, the hidden rarities, and the true reasons why collectors chase this coin more than a century later. So settle in, because you are about to step inside the untold story of the 1919 Buffalo nickel, a journey that blends art, conflict, economics, and American spirit into one powerful narrative. The story of the 1919 Buffalo nickel begins long before the year 1919 itself, because to understand why this coin matters, you need to understand the world that shaped it and the vision of the artists who created it. So let us step back to the early years of the 20th century, when the United States Mint was searching for ways to make American coins more beautiful, more symbolic, and more representative of the nation's identity. The Barber designs had dominated American coinage for decades, and by the early 1900s, they were considered outdated, uninspired, and lacking the artistic energy that the new century demanded. President Theodore Roosevelt, a leader known for his bold vision, saw American coinage as an opportunity to show the world what the nation stood for, and he wanted something new, something powerful, something uniquely American that would look unlike any coin before. And out of this desire came the Indian head, or buffalo nickel, designed by the legendary sculptor James Earl Fraser. Fraser envisioned a coin that would capture the authentic spirit of the American West, a coin that would honor the people and the buffalo that defined the frontier experience. And so he crafted an obverse portraying a Native American profile based on a combination of real individuals, and a reverse featuring a mighty American bison standing strong and grounded in the rugged land it symbolized. When the Buffalo nickel debuted in 1913, it was immediately recognized not only as a work of art, but as a bold statement. This was America looking back at its own roots and preserving them through everyday currency. However, beautiful designs often come with challenges, and the Buffalo nickel was no exception. The raised elements wore down quickly. The date faded with ease, and the coin proved difficult for the mint to produce at high speeds. Still, the coin endured, and by 1919, it had become one of the most recognizable pieces of circulating currency in the nation. Now we shift to the historical moment in which the 1919 Buffalo nickel was born. The First World War had just ended in late 1918, and the United States found itself transitioning from wartime pressure to peacetime rebuilding. Factories shifted from military production back to consumer goods. Millions of soldiers returned home, inflation rose, and the nation grappled with major social and economic change. In this environment, millions of coins were needed to fuel daily commerce, and the Buffalo nickel was one of the essential denominations circulating in every corner of American life. The year 1919 stands out because it marks a turning point in minting volume, economic demand, and the artistic legacy of the Buffalo nickel itself. One collectors talk about the 1919 Buffalo nickel, they often mention the three mints involved: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each mint produced its own 1919 nickel, and each one came with unique characteristics and challenges. Philadelphia produced the highest number, and these coins often circulated heavily, which means surviving examples in high grade are scarce. Denver nickels from 1919 are known for softer strikes because the dies wore down quickly and because production methods were not always consistent. Then we have the 1919 San Francisco nickel, a coin admired by many collectors for its distinctive mint mark and its tendency to show more detail when the strike quality was strong, and also often showing weakness in the central high points due to uneven die pressure. As we move deeper into the story, the importance of the coin becomes more than just its mint mark. The 1919 Buffalo nickel reflects the technological and industrial limitations of its time. The mint struggled to maintain die quality, and the high relief of the design made it difficult to produce coins that would stand up to years of circulation. This is why so many 1919 nickels today are worn flat with the date barely visible or missing entirely. Collectors know this problem well because the date on Buffalo nickels was raised to high and wore off long before the rest of the design faded. This has created an entire market around dateless nickels, which still flood coin shops and flea markets today. But for a 1919 with a full visible date, especially with sharp details on the hair braids, the cheekbone, and the buffalo's horn, those pieces are treasured. No, imagine America in 1919. Think of cobblestone streets, early automobiles, crowds of workers leaving factories, war veterans returning home, banks reopening their peacetime services, and in every pocket from coast to coast you could hear the clink of Buffalo nickels. People used them to buy bread, milk, newspapers, train rides, and simple everyday goods. No one at the time thought about collecting them because they were simply tools of daily life. Yet these ordinary coins have now become time capsules, preserving the movement of hands they passed through, preserving the energy of a nation rebuilding itself after a global conflict, and preserving the artistic ideals of an earlier era. Deeper you go into the world of the 1919 Buffalo nickel, the more layers of history you uncover. You discover the long debates inside the mint about whether to retire the design because of production problems. You learn about the artists who argued that American coinage should remain beautiful even if it meant more work for the mint. You learn about the economic forces of post-war America that shaped how many coins were struck and how fast they entered circulation. You see the shift of the 1920s approaching, an age of jazz flappers, booming industry, and changing national identity. The 1919 nickel sits right at that crossroads, caught between the old world of the 1910s and the modern energy of the 1920 SAs. We explore the design itself. We find countless artistic details. Fraser added subtle texture to the buffalo's first shadows in the facial features of the Native American, the rugged ground under the buffalo's hooves, and the uneven but realistic sculpting that gives the coin depth and personality. Unlike the smooth, uniform designs of earlier coins, the Buffalo nickel feels alive. It feels handcrafted. It feels like a sculpture you can hold in your fingers. This is part of the reason collectors admire the series so passionately, and why a simple 1919 nickel, even in worn condition, can tell a powerful story. Looking at rarity, we find that 1919 nickels in high grades are far scarcer than their mintage numbers suggest, because most circulated heavily throughout the 1920s and 1930s. By the time collectors began saving them, many had already worn down. This creates major value differences between worn examples and those that survive in mint state conditions. A sharp 1919 with full horn detail on the buffalo and attract strong collector interest. An exceptionally well-struck San Francisco example can attract even more attention, and a gem-level Philadelphia or Denver coin with bright original luster becomes a highlight in advanced collections. As the video continues, we dive into the lives of the people connected to the coin. We talk about Fraser's early inspirations living on the American frontier, observing Native American culture, and sketching the great bison herds that once roamed the plains, we revisit his desire to honor these subjects on a coin that every American would use every day. We examine the mint's correspondence arguing over technical issues and repeated attempts to modify the design. Then we compare how the design evolved during the decade and how the coins struck in 1919 reflect the maturity of the series before the redesign that would replace it in 1938. By the time the viewer reaches the final hour of this documentary, they understand that the 1919 Buffalo nickel is more than a collectible. It is a symbol of resilience, artistry, history, and American spirit. It represents a moment when the nation was transforming, rebuilding, and redefining itself, and it stands as a reminder that even the smallest objects can carry the weight of entire eras with them. Imagine holding a coin so iconic that its very design tells the story of America's rugged frontier spirit, a coin born from a national desire to capture the strength of the American bison and the legacy of the native people who shaped the land. Long before the modern nation even existed, the 1913 Buffalo nickel is not just metal, it is a monument to history, and today we dive into the birth of one of the most unforgettable coins the United States Mint has ever produced and the secrets, controversies, and mysteries that began the moment this coin entered circulation. If you think you know the Buffalo nickel, think again, because the story of the 1913 issue is far deeper, more dramatic, and more legendary than you can imagine. That story of the 1913 Buffalo nickel begins long before the coin ever touched the press of a United States Mint facility. It begins with a growing national hunger for artistic reform in American coinage. By the early 1900s, the United States was experiencing a shift in identity. Cities were growing, technology was advancing, and people were feeling a renewed desire to reflect American character in its currency. President Theodore Roosevelt played a major role in inspiring this movement, calling the nation's coinage artistically lifeless and pushing for bolder, more meaningful designs. This wave of creative energy laid the groundwork for a new 5-cent piece that would reject tradition and instead embrace the spirit of the American West. Sculptor James Earl Fraser, a student of Augustus St. Gaudens, would soon rise to the forefront of this mission. Fraser was a man whose childhood experiences deeply shaped his artistic approach. Having grown up on the frontier, he had witnessed bison herds and interacted with Native Americans, and these memories stayed vivid in his mind. Years later, when he was asked to design a new nickel, he knew immediately that he wanted to create something powerful, something that would embody the culture, the wildlife, and the untamed landscape that defined the old American frontier. Fraser believed that coins should tell stories, and he set out to create a design so bold that anyone who held it would feel a connection to the nation's heritage. The creation of the 1913 Buffalo nickel was not easy. In fact, it faced intense criticism before it even launched. From the start, Fraser's design was praised by artists and historians, but it was met with great resistance by the United States Mint and especially by the National Vending Machine Company of America and the Hobbs Manufacturing Company, which produced coin-operated devices. These companies complained that Fraser's design would not function properly because the relief was too high and the edges too uneven. They argued that vending machines would jam or reject the nickel altogether. This led to long disputes, revisions, and redesigns as Fraser fiercely defended his artistic vision and the manufacturers demanded mechanical practicality. Despite delays, the Buffalo nickel was approved and ready for production in early 1913. Mint director George E. Roberts fully supported the design and believed the coin would become a national symbol. Following months of adjustments, the moment finally came when the first examples of the new nickel rolled out of the dies at the Philadelphia Mint. The design featured the portrait of a Native American on the obverse, not a portrait of one single person, but a composite inspired by several individuals Fraser had studied and sketched during his life. Among them were Chief Iron Tail of the Oglala, Lakota Chief Two Moons of the Cheyenne, and possibly Chief John Big Tree. The face was strong, determined, and deeply expressive, capturing not only the individuals who inspired it, but the spirit of an entire people in the reverse stood a massive American bison, often believed to be modeled after Black Diamond, a famous buffalo living at the Central Park Zoo in New York. This image of strength grounded the coin in the physical and cultural landscape of the American West, while the obverse celebrated human history, the reverse celebrated nature together. The two sides formed a tribute to resilience, strength, and survival. 1913 Buffalo nickel entered circulation with immediate public fascination. People admired its boldness, its raw emotion, and its departure from the more classical European styles that had dominated U.S. coinage for decades, yet the coin also immediately faced practical issues. Most notably, the placement of the date and the denomination. The date on the coin was placed on a raised portion of the design near the Native American's shoulder, and collectors soon discovered that the date would quickly wear away from even light circulation. This made many early nickels dateless long before their time, a flaw that would follow the series for its entire 25-year life. The words 5 cents on the reverse were placed on the ground beneath the buffalo, and early versions, known today as Type 1, had the denomination on a raised mound, this to wore down easily, and in the same year 1913, the design was modified to Type 2, where the ground beneath the buffalo was flattened and strengthened so that the words 5 cents would last longer. This means the 1913 Buffalo nickel exists in two distinct varieties: the Type 1, which is loved for its dramatic artwork, and the Type 2, which represents the mint's attempt to fix durability issues collectors today value both types, but the Type 1 coins hold a special place in numismatic history because they represent Fraser's pure artistic vision before the mint stepped in with modifications. As the coins spread across America, they became symbols of the Wild West, appearing in the pockets of ranchers, railroad workers, factory laborers, and families living in small towns and growing cities. The buffalo image captured imaginations, reminding people of the disappearing frontier and the nation's rapid transformation. The Native American portrait sparked conversations about culture, representation, and identity. Fraser believed deeply that Native Americans represented the earliest history of the land, and he wanted their presence on a coin to remind Americans of their origins. Throughout the first months of circulation, newspapers wrote about the buffalo nickel, praising its artistic beauty, but also noting its technical flaws. Critics claimed the design was too complex for a coin meant to endure heavy handling, yet collectors cherished the detail and bold imagery, and even in 1913 people began putting these coins aside, knowing their impact would reach far beyond everyday commercial production process. For the 1913 Buffalo nickel also reveals a deeper historical story. Philadelphia struck the majority of the coins. The Denver and San Francisco mints also produced their own issues, creating 3 varieties for collectors, each bearing the PD or S mint marks. Well known today, minting challenges were frequent because the dies struggled with the depth and relief of Fraser's design, leading to faster die wear and more frequent replacements, which in turn created multiple minor varieties, including differences in horn detail, feather shape, and the appearance of the buffalo's back. These subtle changes make the 1913 series a treasure for collectors who enjoy studying die states and identifying rare varieties. The year continued public affection for the design only grew. The Buffalo nickel started appearing in illustrations, advertisements, and even early Hollywood props because it carried an instantly recognizable American identity. But behind this fame, more challenges continued. Retailers complained about the rapid where vending machine companies demanded further adjustments, and the mint kept analyzing ways to extend die life, even though the design would ultimately stay in use for decades. These early concerns marked the beginning of long-running debates about the balance between artistry and practicality in U.S. coinage. The 1913 issue therefore represents not just the beginning of a new series, but the opening chapter in a larger national conversation about how coins should look, how they should function, and what they should represent. The buffalo nickel became a landmark in coin design, setting standards and inspiring future artists who sought to bring emotion and storytelling into the metal that passed from hand to hand across the Nationte. Cultural impact of the 1913 buffalo nickel cannot be overstated. This coin entered circulation during a period of rapid American change, immigration, industrialization, westward memory revival, and evolving cultural identity all met at once, and the buffalo nickel became a small but powerful mirror reflecting both heritage and transformation. The Native American portrait brought a face to millions who had been historically marginalized, and the buffalo reminded Americans of a wilderness that had once defined the nation but was now fading fast, a reminder that progress came with costs and that history should never be forgotten.